And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead because I will just insert that poop story.
Okay, great. That's great. That's God, that's fun.
I know. I agree. What's the point of healing if it's not fun?
This is the Healing Feeling Shit Show. Are you gonna have that feeling and let it go? There is no other way to feel whole. This is the Healing Feeling Shit Show.
HFSS Feelers. I'm Rachel Kaplan, creator and host. Welcome to season 2, where we accessorize our epic understanding of how to heal ourselves by learning to have our feelings like we have our poops. And you can get that also through season 1 if you haven't already. In this season, you'll find healing experts, more unscripted therapy, more poop stories, and Q&A. To get involved, visit us at healingfeelingshitshow.com. To become a part of the feelings movement, follow Healing Feeling Shit Show on Facebook or Instagram. And to take the quiz that helps you figure out what the emotional tone of your core wound is and get the free kit of where to start with those healing skills, go to yourcorewound.com. Finally, please subscribe, rate, review, and share with your people so other folks can find out about the shit show, and together we can all spread this feelings movement. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, Healing Feeling Feelers. We have another really exciting episode for you today. And today is one of those days where I feel like I am getting to meet kind of Bay Area legends. These are folks that I've been hearing about actually as a therapist. I had clients, I think maybe 10 years ago, roughly, talking about the work that they were doing with this fantastic couple I'm about to introduce you to. And I'm really excited personally to learn about their work with pleasure and embodiment and aliveness and sexuality. So we got another juicy episode coming for you. So first of all, I'd like to welcome, and then I'll introduce you guys officially, Erwan and Alicia Davon. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hey, great to be here.
It's exciting.
Yay. And I'm saying everyone's name right?
You can pronounce Erwan.
Oh, Erwan. That sounds better. Erwan.
You know, I like it better, but I grew up with Erwan, so I never minded when people use that. And then somewhere in my 20s, I kind of changed the pronunciation.
Erwan. Well, they're both beautiful. So welcome, Erwan and Alicia. So let me tell you why these guys are here. For over 20 years, Erwan, who was joined by Alicia in 2003, have been working successfully with singles and couples, teaching their signature process, the Davon method, to hundreds of students in groups, retreats, and individual sessions, and helping them create the relationships of their dreams, which sounds really good right now. Erwan and Alicia have a unique approach to relationship coaching that combines their educational backgrounds in psychology and aspects of Zen Buddhism to provide a holistic method to effectively improve connection with the self and others. Erwan studied psychology after a difficult childhood and an early introduction to therapeutic work. He went to live and study in a Zen monastery, direct a yoga ashram, and began teaching personal development at one of the world's largest personal growth organizations. Erwan's passion for helping and teaching people led him to found Erwan Davon Teachings in 1995, specifically to help people improve their relationships. Alicia Davon holds a master's degree in internal psychology with a focus on women's romantic and sensual expression. She trained as a therapist before meeting Erwan and led numerous women's groups devoted to female pleasure and life fulfillment from career to relationship. She met Erwan 15 years ago and started teaching with him soon after. Together, Erwan and Alicia developed the Pleasure Course, which has helped thousands to achieve their ideal love lives. They provide a safe place to explore psychological inquiry, pleasure, and sexuality. They have spent years perfecting their curriculum and techniques and are excited to share their expertise with newcomers so they can help improve chemistry, connection, communication, and passion in others' lives. Wow.
I love it. I
enjoy hearing that too.
That's the first question.
It's all true,
It is true.
Well, the first question is, how do you feel as you hear your bio? And we can go from sensation level to emotions. And just so you know, in case you don't know, all emotions are welcome on the Healing Feeling Shit show. So if there's a part like, really, I'm that guy or that woman, then those parts are welcome too. But how do you feel? It sounds like you guys loved it, but...
Well, here's what I felt. I mean, I felt very warm inside as you were reading that. And I felt really moved also. I mean, Erwan and I have been together and building this organization together for almost 20 years. And everything we've been through, it's so fun. It's so sexy. It's great. I had images of all of the people we've supported over the years and all the phases, and it was just fun.
That's awesome.
I was kind of like, boy, how did that happen? It's just nice to have, all the difficult moments in life, feeling through stuff and talking about stuff and practicing and all that. And, that it all really turns out. And it was just fabulous to hear that.
Well, that's so beautiful. I'm so glad you were both able to take in who you are so deeply. And I totally agree. And the Healing Feeling Shit show is the fruits of a lot of learning how to be with pain. And I think that's how we can be so helpful. So the first question I want to ask each of you, we're going to dive into your work and to kind of the cutting edge or the confluence of sexuality and healing. But I want to do that in a moment, because what I do first with guests is just hear a little bit about their personal journey of how you came to be focused on this offering. And, you can share as much or as little. Obviously, this will be not the whole journey, because that would be well more than our interview today has time for. But, how did your personal life lead you to this passion?
My parents' relationship was a disaster. And they immigrated during that disaster, got a divorce in New York. I was in psychoanalysis when I was 15, multiple times a week. I had an obsessive compulsive disorder. I hadn't seen my mother for most of a decade, who took off back to France. I couldn't even function. I was taken out of school. I was forced into the world of psychology, and I thank my lucky stars for it. After a lot of that kind of work, I got into self-development. Then one day I sat down and I said, God, I love people and I can actually relate to people now. What am I the most interested in? And I started writing on a piece of paper a list, and right at the top of that list was women. And, my whole journey in this world started then, and that was almost 25 years ago.
Now, when you realized you were most interested in women, did you feel at that point either skilled or knowledgeable about women, or you were just like, I want to learn about women, or I just want to be near women? Or tell me more about that women moment. That was juicy.
That's a great question. We've never had anybody ask me that question. I think that I thought I was skilled, but I was not.
Of course.
And probably the biggest skill I had was the willingness to sort of admit it and be upfront about it. And, I got in the process of learning, and I took on a process of making an offer to a woman every day, and shortly learned how unskilled I was. But over time, hopefully developed some skills. But back at that point, no, I don't think I was.
And one more question, obviously I can hear the juice, the eros, just the aliveness of the interest in women. So I imagine that sexuality was a part of it, but did it feel exclusively sexual, or was it more, generic or comprehensive than sexual interest in women?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was multidimensional, because at one level it was sexual. This is my early 20s. At another level, it was more of a heart love kind of. There was something in being with women that lit me up more than just sexually. Some kind of sense of completion and love, and I just really liked being around women, and so there was something in this kind of love, sort of, yes, the genitals, but also in the heart space. And then there was also in the psychological space. My mother had taken off.
Right. I was just thinking that. I'm glad you said it and not me.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it was coming though.
Exactly. Yeah. I was also working out my shit.
Your mommy stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. It's a solid start. How about you, Alicia? What led you to this passion?
Well, I had an opposite childhood of Erwan. I had a super stable, good, healthy upbringing. I grew up in a suburb of LA, raised Jewish, 2 great parents, a little brother, everything. Had relationships. Things were pretty good, And then I found that I was getting more and more obsessed with sex and boys and romance as I was getting older, to the point where I was in grad school, and grad school for psychology, as I think is the coolest, because you can study whatever you want and write about your own process. And those are your papers that you write. And I was studying everything I could get my hands on around female sexuality and arousal and desire and all of this stuff. And so a woman that was in my program, a woman, Shayna, who I think you and I both know, a good friend of mine, she said, you got to meet this guy, Erwan. He's into this. He has this course called the Pleasure Course, and he's all about spirituality and sex. And there's this thing, extended orgasm. And I was like getting completely turned on as she was talking about it. And I'm like,
I'm kegling right now.
Right. Yeah. Good. And so she brought me to Erwan. He was teaching this group. And I remember the moment, Erwan was teaching with some of his friends this communication games night, and everybody was sitting in a circle. And he looked at me during the group and asked me some kind of question. And I was feeling my pussy like swell as he was talking to me. And the different topics that everybody was talking about during the night, I was like, man, this is a place that I could really be myself. I could be as sex crazed as I am, and respected and loved and everything. I mean, there was just room for all my desire.
Well, thank you. And thank you also for being the first person who I think used the word pussy. Actually, maybe we have one other episode where pussy is on the show. I love it. I let them know before. I'm like, we're going to mark it explicit. There's a swear word in the name. Bring everything. But it really is refreshing just to hear about your swollen pussy. So, yeah.
Good.
And, it's interesting. I just finished I'm doing a guided journey through my first season, which is around how to heal. And we were just doing the shame episode. And, that's part of what I'm excited to dive into. But it's just, I think, so rare to hear people communicating about their desire and turn on and swollen parts, engorged, parts without shame. And so it really does feel revolutionary. And I think that's part of what's so important about what you guys are doing, and hopefully what you can help us as listeners today with.
Yeah, it's being awake is great. Consciousness is great, and living in the Zen monastery is great, and like that. But to be awake, not just in the head center and kind of understand things, but also in the heart center and really feel that relational space, and then also actually in the body, so that the life is lived that way. But then even all the way, to your point, Rachel, all the way down to the sex center. It's rare that consciousness pervades the sex center, even in a literal sense. How often are people literally feeling conscious of their sex center? Not as much as we'd like to be. So,
right, yeah,
that's how that's the game we like to play.
Well, go ahead, Alicia.
Well, and I love the over and over and over again proof of that in my world. I mean, when I was in my graduate program and I met Erwan, and he and I were dating. And then I eventually checked out the pleasure course because I'm like, what is this pleasure course you teach? And then I started volunteering at all of them because they were amazing. And at the same time, I was writing my master's thesis. And so I chose my topic to be, what is the true source of a woman's attractiveness? Like, really, what is it? All this juicy research on it. And a lot of my research came from pleasure course after pleasure course after pleasure course. You know, these awesome women would come into the course. The course is for men and women, singles and couples, all of it. And like beautiful women are beautiful. But by the end of the course, they had inhabited their pussy and their sensuality and their turn on. And it was like this, they were complete in this way, this glow and this sensuality oozing from them. That is completely a part of them, of all of us.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And before we go on to more of that work and how to help people who are disconnected from their inherent, gushy, oozy, glowiness, I'm curious just, and this is maybe a little bit subversive, but, as a therapist, I can't fuck my clients, right? So I don't. And I know it's very different for you guys, but I'm just kind of curious about what it was like when he asked you a question and you're swelling. And Erwan, did you know that? And what was it like to just get hot for the teacher and then make him your own? And, just can you share a tiny bit about that journey?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say is that Erwan, that was me sitting in a group of people in his living room. We got into a relationship first. And then later I checked out the pleasure course because I wanted to see what he was doing. So I was never a student of his, at the outset. Yeah.
How was it for you, Erwan? Did you remember the question you asked her? Could you tell what was happening?
I can't remember the question, but I can remember the moment and the time, and there was a lot of turn on in the air. One of the interesting things about turn on, Rachel, is that there's often a lot of turn on in the air. You pass somebody in the street and you're attracted to them. There's that moment of turn on. There's even that moment of being in love with them often. And one of the things that was happening in that group is we were just acknowledging it, because the conversation was acknowledging what was present, kind of like in this conversation, we're acknowledging it. And that creates more of it. Right. So it takes some of the mystery out of where's the chemistry. That's people's number one complaint sexually. Where's the chemistry? I'm not as turned on as I used to be, especially if people are in a relationship. Well, it's there, and it just comes from being acknowledged. And, as the teacher, I was willing to acknowledge it. And Alicia was one of the people who was really willing to feel it, and experience it and sort of run with the ball, if you will. So that's how it happened. And when I remember that moment, it has a brightness, like a luminosity and a palpableness and even in my body right now, I feel kind of a substantial kind of thickness in my hands and my body and my genitals and my feet. And, that's often there. And when we acknowledge it, there's just that much more of it.
Right. And it's truly amazing, just, working together and teaching together, and you have a child, and, just that you are so many years into this. I think it is a profound testament to have so much aliveness and charge between you, which it sounds like is what you're helping people do, right? Or part of what you're doing. It sounds like you have tons of angles, but.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate thing we're supporting people in doing is being awake and alive in their real actual life. And so we're sort of a spiritual school on one hand, you could say, but it's more like a lived spiritual school, or the lived version, all the way down into the relationship and the sex, which we've been talking about. The heavy lifting is the psychological work, because the wounding from childhood, those patterns are what tend to play out in every area of life, in work and with friends and so on. But in romantic relationships, they play out probably the most.
Right.
And, we address sexuality, yes, for the fun. That's probably the main reason. But the other reason we address it is because if you can work, though, if you can really be awake and functional to the point of enjoyment and pleasure in the area of sex, you can really do it in any area of life because it's the most challenging area to do it in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I have one mentor who describes how it's the most fragile part of the system, and often shuts down soonest under the pressures of psychological wounding. And another one of my teachers used to say, if you want to understand how you relate to God, look at how you relate to orgasm. So
exactly right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So, I mean, part of what's exciting for me about today is because what my work is and my offering is really trying to help people with their wounding, their core wounding. And I think that the therapeutic industry is phoning it in pretty hard with a solid B- as far as actually helping people heal, and that there's a lot of misunderstanding there. And I know that sexuality is one of the biggest places of wounding. And so when we were prepping for this call, we thought we would look at how those things come together. So, and I know it's much like you're saying, it's much deeper than sex. And, I mean, maybe we should start there. I know how I define what core wounds are, but do you want to speak to, either of you, like kind of summarizing how you see the essence of how people come into those initial core wounds or wounded patterns, as you say?
Well, I'll start, and then Erwan, you can add anything that you want to add. It's interesting that you used the word essence there, because as you were asking the question, what I feel and experience is that wounds happen when a person is disconnected, loses contact with their essence, the real core of who they are. And when we lose contact with that, there's an experience of a hole or a something missing or a wound. And usually these things happen when we're so young, we don't even really know what to do with it or what's happening. All we know is that there's some kind of pain, and then we work quickly to cover that up and make sure it never happens again.
Mm-hmm.
One of the specific ways that tends to happen along the spectrum. And the spectrum can be anything from, let's take a parent-child relationship, because that's generally the primary relationship we're born into. It's sort of the crucible that our psychological selves are formed in.
Right.
So that parent is relating with that child, and eventually, that child has some level of sexuality to them. And much younger, Freud, illuminated people. That's actually a lot younger than they used to think. Mm-hmm. And that sexuality is going to be related to somewhere along the lines, somewhere on the spectrum between too much and too little. Too much can go to the extremes of sexual abuse. Too little goes to the extremes of not acknowledging the person's sexuality or gender at all, not celebrating it. Both are very painful. It's much more common to acknowledge it too little. It can be more traumatic to acknowledge it too much, especially if it's some kind of sexual abuse. So it's very rare that a parent really nails that, and it's this kind of healthy, positive celebration of the child's gender and eventually their sexuality. And, Alicia talked about her childhood and she has great parents, and she does. I really got lucky with my in-laws. And, the way her and her dad relate, it's just amazing, because it's this very loving, respectful father-daughter relationship that has just the right amount of celebration of her as a woman and her sexuality, and not too much. It's like just the right amount. And then
congrats,
for me,
Alicia.
Yeah.
You just won the lottery. Fuck.
Yeah, I feel that way.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to say that to sort of amplify what Alicia was saying, to kind of, on that spectrum, we all land somewhere, and most of us, unfortunately don't land at that ideal place.
It's interesting. I was wondering how much I was going to out myself in this interview, and I think I'm going to strive toward the minimal for me, just because, my poor clients. I mean, this whole podcasting really turned not like there was a neutral blank slate. That doesn't exist. We all know that now, but that is gone. But, what I'll share is my first memory, and I was in a crib. I was like an infant, was like figuring out what I called as a kid tickling myself, but it was masturbation. I remember just like the memory is just, remember this. It was like this like moment of like, you need to know to do this again. But I was in a crib and there was a Raggedy Ann doll, and it was really intense. It was like, I think for all of us to, mainly for everyone else, I think to figure out how to relate to me, because I was like probably one. And I liked it, and I was not going to stop. And then eventually the shame that set in as like about a 7-year-old. I remember it by age 7, I was like horrified and didn't want my family to talk about my childhood, which is so funny. Can you imagine a 7-year-old not wanting to talk about her childhood, as if I wasn't in the beginning of it? So anyway, it's been a real journey for me. And I think that when I was in grad school, I actually wanted to focus, and I often make comments to my friends who have children. Like one memory I have is a couple where they had a brand new infant and they were blow drying the genitals to soothe the baby, and I think maybe just as part of a diaper change. But I was like, one day she's going to hand someone a blow dryer and be like, do you mind using this? And, and the dad, I mean, he looked like he had seen a ghost. It was like so awkward, but I love bringing that up, that like, yeah, we are inherently sexual right away. And I think that relationship between a parent and child, and, or all the people in the house and the child and their sexuality, is so delicate and fragile. So I'm really excited. Hopefully you guys can have some tips maybe for parents. Like, in fact, and I don't want to stop you. You can respond to what I just shared if you want, but I'd love to hear a little more about like that perfect balance. Like, what does that, if you can be more specific, so people who have children who are like, what do I do? They can learn.
Well, one thing is for, if it's a couple raising a child versus a single parent, to really model a healthy relationship, including a healthy romantic relationship, to not be afraid of hugging or kissing your partner and demonstrating that you're attracted to them, and that kind of thing. So between the mother and father, or mothering people, fathering people, it's important to model that. That's probably the most important, because children learn a lot more from what they see than from what you tell them.
Yeah, I mean, with our son, he loves seeing us be affectionate. I mean, the smile on his face, and sometimes he'll like join in the hug, or sometimes he'll be like, Daddy, tickle mommy. And so then I'm laughing and we're having a good time together, and he's just delighted. It really adds something.
There was a story you were telling me the other day. A little girl asked him for some. How did that go? Why should I give you this?
Oh, well, that was related to me.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a great, oh my gosh. So Aiden and I were walking around Trader Joe's. He was in the cart. I had opened this little container of watermelon chunks for us to eat as we were walking around.
Wait, the dried watermelon?
No, actually the normal.
Oh, nice.
Raw watermelon.
Okay, great. With the juice, obviously. Yeah, keep going.
And so he was holding the container. And then I said, hey, Aiden, can I have a piece? And then I said, wait a minute. I don't need to ask you if I can have one. I'm just going to take one. And I stuck my hand in the container and got my chunk. And he said, well, why don't you have to ask me? And I was like trying to think of a good answer. And then he said, because you're a woman, that's why you don't have to ask me. And I said, exactly.
Deep.
Really, I think the best thing to do is celebrate the differences between the genders, and again, it can be two women, it can be two men, it can be a man and a woman, but a romantic relationship is a polarized relationship. And in terms of raising children, be whatever gender you want. Switch on Mondays, switch on Tuesdays, be this at work and this at home. There's a lot of enlightenment happening nowadays about being open-minded and flexible. And unfortunately, there's also some mistaking difference for superiority and inferiority. So kind of sameness is getting kind of popularized instead of difference. And, it's nice to be diverse and have difference. And in terms of raising a child, if you want the child to have a healthy kind of orientation towards sexuality, you want them to have a healthy orientation towards diversity, a healthy orientation towards difference, a healthy orientation towards people who are of a different gender.
Right.
And, again, it doesn't lock anybody into being one way forever or only one way. We've all got masculine and feminine qualities and all the rest of that. But to really approve of that electrical charge, kind of like a battery has a positive pole and a negative pole, to approve of that charge and that difference, reality, being, life's difference, and to approve of that, because what happens, unfortunately, is that it gets shamed. The head center is really okay. The heart center is kind of okay. The body, not so much. And the sex center, the most polarized difference between the two sexes really gets shut down. So the best advice we could give to parents is to just acknowledge it and just celebrate it so that it doesn't get charged with shame.
Also, there's another episode which will be out by the time this comes out with this woman, Sonia Renee Taylor, and her whole mission is called The Body is Not an Apology. It's really profound, but she's basically saying that through radical self-acceptance of our own bodies, that's the best, most strategic way toward equality and justice in the world. And her big point was the more you can actually make peace with, your body and the unknownness of another body, accepting difference and really not trying to all be the same and all try to be the default body. But when you were speaking, I could really imagine that the more difference is celebrated, the more the child's unique body, whether it fits into all the pressures that we get on our bodies, whether we're boys or girls, can also kind of be overcome around self-love and then to actually be able to appreciate another unique and different body, not to mention all the charge and the polarity and the sexiness of what can come from that.
Yeah, it's really very profound what you're saying, because in accepting the body, it's like accepting reality, because reality has many dimensions to it, and the manifest dimension is not separate from the consciousness or the spiritual. They're not really actually separate.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's the appearance. It's the living body. So when we can accept that all the way through, including the genitals, it's like accepting reality. It's like accepting ourselves. It's like being awake, and it happens to open the doorway up to fun. It's not an accident,
right,
that like the most acceptance in the body is where the fun is. It's not an accident that how being likes to create more beings is through sex. It's the most sacred of the sacred.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think it's the same with healing as well. And that can get us back to looking at some of wounds and healing wounds, is that, that all the all the things we really need to know about how to heal ourselves is through the body, and that, you can have all the insight you want. I was kind of struck that you started in the psychoanalytic world. You've come so far. Wow. Not to shame the psychoanalytic world. I think it's great, but I personally am of the mind that, having big ideas about why is not as helpful, but the how and allowing our feelings to happen and being connected to the expression of it through our embodiment is way more effective. So if you don't have anything to say about that, what I'd like to ask you guys is, what are the biggest wounds you see around sex?
So definitely shame, wounds of shame or embarrassment. Like Erwan was mentioning earlier, there is the spectrum of people that had too much or unwanted or the wrong kind of attention on their sexuality early in their life, all the way over to not having enough attention on it and it not really being acknowledged. I mean, we have a client that we were working with intensively with his wife in one of our extended orgasm training programs, and he was really working with his sexuality and the sexuality of the men in his family, uncles and so forth, was never acknowledged. He, for a really long time, felt like he was asexual, couldn't really get turned on, had a really difficult time with that, and moved through that, which is really awesome. And the wounding was really like it was absent, not acknowledged. So people can have a lot of shame and embarrassment about their sexuality.
Another way that tends to play out is that people have a lack of skill in it. So, sex is a very important part of romantic relationship. And, just kind of like if you're a tennis player, getting on a tennis court and playing tennis is a big part of being a tennis player. And if we don't know what we're doing, that causes a wound also. The lack of skill causes a certain shame in the area, and then people tend to just kind of avoid it. So, when we teach people, we're very practical about it. For example, tonight, we're going to be doing a demonstration of extended orgasm. I'll be stroking Alicia's clitoris. She'll be undressed. There'll be about 60 people in the room. It's very practical. Here's the clitoris.
My pussy will be projected on a huge screen for the people in the back.
Oh my God. I love you guys. I just like the fact that you're like, I'm sure that like a lot of people, I mean, I'm hoping I know we have listeners all over the world. We're in 106 countries as last time I checked, but just the fact that like right after describing that you're going to be stroking your wife's clitoris while she, naked in front of 60 people, you say we're really practical. I just love that. Thank you. Okay. So you're just going to show people how it's done on the big screen. What's it called when you're at a sports game? The Megatron.
Oh, yeah, like the big, and they have big ones nowadays.
Okay,
that's
cool.
That's where we're headed.
That would be really exciting.
It gives new direction to the kiss cam.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so keep going. What happens next?
So how the event works basically is I talk to folks for a while. We talk about orgasm, what orgasm is. I'll just say it's the increase in sexual energy plus the release at the same time. People tend to first increase the energy, then release. They kind of go over the edge. But you can extend that if you can stay at a high level of sensitivity and stay releasing at the same time. Masters and Johnson's came up with 12 signs of orgasm, involuntary contractions in the genitals and engorgement and a whole bunch of them. If you can stay turned on and keep your genitals relaxed, kind of like if you're going poo or you're going to the bathroom or something like that, that kind of tight ass phenomena that we walk around with as human beings, if we can undo that in the bedroom and be very turned on, the genitals actually stay in a state of involuntary contraction and release, and it's not a quick up and down. So we talk to people a little bit about that. Then we demonstrate some touching practices, hands on heart, hands on abdomen, about 10 of them, to really demonstrate to people that being in contact is the most important. The connection is the most important, so that we're literally in a field of connection, a field of relationship. I'm feeling Alicia completely. She's feeling me. Even the 60 people in the room are in the field of relationship with us. So that kind of clues people into like, oh, being with the person is the most important, and being with their body is part of that. So we build it through a variety of touching practices, and then eventually I'm stroking Alicia's clitoris, and she's demonstrating the signs of orgasm for about 20 or 30 minutes. Then I bring her down, a little massage, kind of ground her, talk about the importance of coming down and grounding. So you don't need to smoke a cigarette or eat 2 pints of Ben & Jerry's or crash your car or whatever
Right.
to come down. And, that's basically how it works.
Wow. Now, just real quick, interesting question. I mean, Alicia, do you ever feel, is there ever pressure? Do you just trust your sexual response so much that never feels pressured? Or, because I could imagine, I mean, people have trouble like peeing in public. Obviously not you guys. I'm assuming this is your forte, but is there ever pressure, or are you ever like not in the mood to do that kind of thing?
I never feel pressure, and I'm always looking forward to it. And here's the cool thing, though. What we've found is that, one of the reasons it's like a more superficial level reason why people avoid sex is they say, oh, I'm not in the mood. Underneath that, I'm not in the mood is a whole world of
Right.
and wounding and, oh, I'm too tired. But no, really, there's actually resistance and fear and all sorts of stuff. So it's not like I never experienced that. Some days I'm kind of tired, or some days I'm feeling emotional about this or that. But the cool thing is that I don't have to shut any of that out or off. I just know that when I go in to have that extended orgasm experience, I can feel it all and feel it, including in my pussy and in my clitoris. And I just get to be exactly as I am. There's definitely intention in it, and also a total let go and release. And I've done it. God, it would be interesting to calculate how many times I've done demonstrations. I mean, hundreds by now. But every time is new, and I love it.
Beautiful. And are there other people in your teaching school that do the demonstrations? I almost said performance, but that seems kind of not quite the word, the demonstrations.
And we've had students do them. Occasionally we do have students do them, some of the advanced students. That's usually more like on a vacation course. We'll go to Maui or Mexico or something like that. And somebody who's graduated the sensuality expansion program will do a demonstration. We do, on those courses, we do a demo every day, and then people go off and practice. So in that kind of circumstance, we will. But when we do like a big demonstration like tonight, it's almost invariably me doing Alicia.
Talking about wounding, and we got a little sidetracked, but so far we have like the shame of either too much or not enough, and then so far lack of skill. Are there any other core sexual wounds that you guys see most frequently?
All right, let's see. Most frequently, well, I think those are the most frequent ones. Sometimes someone will have some kind of sexual dysfunction. For example, some women have the experience that their clitoris is too sensitive, or their clitoris is they don't feel anything. But that's usually it's not always a psychological issue, but it usually is a psychological issue. And that usually stems from some kind of fear or anxiety or numbing out the sex center from all the reasons that we talked about. Sometimes men will have difficulty getting erect or premature ejaculation. And that can cause a lot of shame. Again, it's usually not a medical issue. It's usually a psychological issue.
Well, let's take two classic, really challenging dynamics, and I'm cutting you off. So if you want to finish, start with whatever you say, with whatever you're going to say. But like with someone who has trouble getting erections, or with a woman who can't come, because I know there's so many women who don't come. Like, I get that it's probably more psychological than biological, but can you talk to us about how do you support those conditions? And feel free, like I said, to say what you were saying.
Yeah, so I'll start because what I was actually about to say was that something we see really often are women who say they can't come, either can't come with a partner or on their own or both, or never have had an orgasm. And I've never, in my almost 20 years of working with women in this area, never found that it was a physical issue. Like, never. It was always psychological / lack of skill. Women often feel like, oh, my orgasm is supposed to look a certain way or mimic the masculine orgasm, or they've seen movies and how there's flailing around or whatever it is, and have gone away from their actual body sensation and acknowledging pleasure when they're touching themselves and being touched. So the way that we deal with that is having the woman start to explore her own sensuality, touching herself slowly in ways that feel good to her without any kind of result needed. Just starting to acknowledge the sensation she's feeling. Like when we support people in the pleasure course, our weekend seminar, we give these sensuality exercises as the activity for everyone that guides each person through these exercises of getting in touch with their senses and the look of their body and the feel of their body, all the way to self-pleasuring with a pleasure orientation versus a goal orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing the exercises alone, eventually with partner, but first alone. And there's no pressure, as Alicia said, so they can just start to pay attention to the actual sensation. And then if they can feel the sensation and approve of what they're feeling, even if it's, I feel numb, okay, let me approve of that, or I feel a little tingling, or if they approve of the sensation will increase. Mm-hmm. And you can keep increasing sensation that way, all the way above what we call the orgasm line. And if then the genitals start to move involuntarily, and if you acknowledge, ooh, that was a little involuntary movement there, or oh, that was a little engorgement there, or something like that, then you start to have more of it and you gradually build it. So that kind of pleasure orientation and acknowledgement and celebration is what has a person have more. It's kind of analogous to folks who have difficulty getting into a relationship. Like before Alicia and I got together, I had a lot of relationships, but I couldn't really get into a relationship. And the reason I couldn't get into a relationship was twofold. One is difficulty with the vulnerability, but the other part was, I was kind of critiquing all the women that I had been in relationship with. And, she's not good enough because of this, and she's not good enough because of that, and, all the rest of that kind of stuff. And it was really a defense mechanism, actually.
Sure.
And it's not the only reason, but it's the number one reason that people have difficulty getting into a romantic relationship. It's the same thing we do with our genitals, which is disapprove.
Right.
If we really approve of other people, the opposite sex, whoever we're attracted to, our genitals, whatever, it tends to get better and better, more and more sensational and even orgasmic.
So one question about the women situation, and then I would love to hear a few things for the erectile dysfunction. But there's so much around letting go of control, right, with orgasm, and you guys tell me. But I feel like when there is that pattern, or when a woman identifies as not coming, that there can be almost a fear, as much as everyone, the whole world is obsessed with orgasm, right? It's like, I think that it can actually become really scary. And I'm curious if you have any tips that you help people with around how to work with letting go of control.
Yes, because that is a main concern, when we really get down to it, is a fear of losing control, for all the reasons we've been talking about, and childhood experiences and all this kind of stuff that happens to us as human beings. So first of all, we approach having more orgasm and pleasure in the body slowly. so that the woman has the chance to feel like, oh, wow, I'm having this fear come up. It feels like this in my body. Okay, putting my attention back on my clitoris and how it's being stroked. And, it's a very, you want to slow down because with pornography and everything, people are just going a mile a minute with sex and trying to get somewhere. So going really slowly, and then the woman has the chance to feel what's happening. And like, for example, I'm thinking of this couple that we just trained in the sensuality expansion program, and the woman was very much about control. I mean, at first, her husband would sit up by her side in the classic stroking position, and he would be going to stroke her clitoris, and she would literally put her hand on top of his hand to like guide it or make sure or something. She was very, very into control. And it was very striking that she really had that thing. And by the end, I mean, she was so relaxed. She was able to communicate moment by moment what she wanted. Like if she wanted a slower stroke, or she wanted to take a little break, or she wanted a firmer stroke. So communication skills happen with that, and really slowing down. That really helps to have a woman feel safe to let go of control and feel pleasure.
One question about the speed. Your pleasure course is a weekend thing. So when you're saying we go slow, I mean, for someone who feels sexually dysfunctional, I mean, do you feel like you're guiding people through a transformative pleasure experience in a weekend? And that sounds fast, but effective.
Most of the people who take the pleasure course end up in some kind of ongoing program. We have weekly programs, and really it takes years to completely transform something. I don't know that anything is ever completely transformed. I certainly don't consider myself completely transformed, and like that, I'm not sure that really exists.
Great. Love it.
We do get to the point where the issues become funny. It's one of the things I like about the title of your show. It really kind of captures that. The pleasure course, the whole first day is about a person getting their relationship patterns conscious of what their relationship patterns are that are playing out, then getting in contact with themselves, their spirit, their being, their life, their source, their Atman, whatever language people like. Then the second day we go into chemistry. How do you create more chemistry with a partner? And then we go into the stages of relationship, the dance through the stages, the choreography of meeting somebody and dating and boyfriend, girlfriend, and committed long-term soulmate kind of relationship like that. Then we go into the sex and the extended orgasm part. People see a demonstration in the pleasure course of me doing Alicia. They do all their own homework privately. Even if it's a couple, they do their homework independently, individually. Course is about half singles, half couples. So it's a lot for 3 days. It really is a lot. And it doesn't make everything better forever. And Some people try to sort of market their workshops like that. It's just not really true that that's going to happen in a week. Right. What can happen is that people can be in a structure that's supportive enough and conscious enough and open enough and skilled enough that we can operate a different way, see things that are possible, even engage in ways that weren't possible before. There's a lot of exercises in the pleasure course. For example, we talk about the evening exercises. A lot of people will report, oh, wow, I had extended orgasm, or the beginning of it, or something like that. There does, after the course, people, go back to their normal lives. They don't have all that structure around them, but it does leave them in a higher place than where they were when they got there. And for some people, that's enough. And some people, wow, I really want to, go even further and integrate it into my life and all the rest of that. And, those are the people who go for like the more long-term, weekly coaching kind of thing.
Those are the groupies.
Right, exactly.
I get that.
Those are the people who come to our parties. We're really big on parties.
Oh man, you probably have really fun parties. I gotta start coming to your parties because fucking dating. But anyway.
Dating. That's we could do a whole show on dating.
Yeah. Well, I did have a dating show, but yeah, we could do another dating show with you guys. And real quick, just since we're talking about the pleasure course, your episode, people are going to be hearing this on January 15th, 2020, crazy 2020. But when is the next pleasure? I mean, how often do you have them? And we'll give your website at the end so people can just get the information themselves. But do you know when the next one is after people are hearing this? If they're like, I need this now?
Yes. We have 5 pleasure courses a year. The next one's over Valentine's Day weekend. So it's February 14th through 16th. And then the one after that is May 15th through 17th, I think is the weekend. And so they can jump into either one.
Okay, great. So I'm curious, and maybe it makes more sense for you, Erwan, but either of you, if you want to speak to, just since we talked about the woman who feels she can't come, how about the guy who is either struggling with not being able to sustain or maintain an erection, or maybe coming too quick? Do you want to speak to either of those as far as actual techniques you guys use to support people overcoming that?
Yeah, with the, hold on a second, I'm going to go on mute for a second and cough.
Maybe we should, while you're coughing, take a quick poop break, especially since you brought up the sphincter. Thank you for that. So right now we're going to have a poop story, and we'll be right back after he's done coughing.
It was my first day ever as a summer camp counselor. It was the first day of the first session of camp. Kids coming up 3 hours from the Bay Area to just outside of Yosemite, and someone had shit their pants. We didn't know who, but it was clearly a child from the bunk of B8. So at dinner, a couple of us were around the bunk and performed a smell test by pretending to accidentally drop our pens, and then as we reached down to pick them up, giving a sniff of the rear ends of a couple of kids at the table until we finally identified the culprit. In between dinner and the all-camp campfire, all the kids went back to their bunks. And as they were leaving, his counselor encouraged him to stay behind and gave him a plastic bag and said, maybe you'd like to change before we go up to the campfire, which he accepted. He went back into his cabin and he changed. And when he came out, his counselor said, do you have anything for me? And the kid did not, and happily went up to the campfire. I was at the campfire at the time. I was not his counselor. I was the counselor for the collection of bunks that he was a part of. And my supervisor came up to me, who was also my friend Dan, and said, Brady, what are you doing right now? And I said, I'm just here watching the campfire. And he goes, great, I need you for something. And I said, what? And he said, we're going on a poop hunt. Because clearly, this kid had pooped their pants. And now they were not wearing those pants. But we did not know where those pants were. So we went to the bunk of B8, opened the door, and nothing was obvious on where these pants would be. We didn't even know what bed he was in, but after sniffing a couple of beds, we were pretty sure we knew which one it was. We looked through his covers and sleeping bag very tentatively, couldn't find anything anywhere, except there was a suitcase in front of his bed. We carefully went up to the suitcase, opened it, and there, on top of all of his clean clothes, with no plastic bag around it, was a pair of deeply and heavily soiled tighty-whities. I was instructed to take these tighty-whities up to the laundry room to wash them. I have them with just a pinch of my fingers on the elastic band, walking up to the laundry room. And it's important to know in this story 2 things. One, that I have a terrible gag reflex and I'm not good with poop, as wasn't my brother, who was 6 years older than me and also used to work at this camp. And B, my supervisor was my brother's best friend and roommate. So I make it up to the laundry room where I meet up with my supervisor, and I'm about to put it into the washing machine when he says, wait, have you dumped it out yet? I looked at him terrified and said, I don't know if I can. He said, no, you have to dump it out first. So I go over the garbage can and give it one big shake, and out comes everything. And it is so disgusting that I then lose it myself, and I lean over and throw up on this kid's soiled underwear as my supervisor laughs and screams, "You're just like your brother, you're just like your brother," because I assume similar things had happened to him. We did wash the underpants, which I don't understand why at this point we didn't just throw them away. We did get them back into his suitcase clean, and no one knew the wiser that this child had pooped his pants on the first day of camp.
In terms of guys who have difficulty getting erect or ejaculating too soon, it's mostly issue of anxiety. So we work with people psychologically first with that, and that kind of takes the pressure off of them.
But how? I'm all about how do you, I call anxiety fear. It's like, how do you work with their fear or anxiety?
Well, the first thing is have them do practices on their own. The second thing is make it okay to be with a partner with a soft cock, for example, if the guy has difficulty getting erect. There's more nerve endings on the cock in a close proximity when it's soft than when it's elongated. Just things like that make it okay. They make it more of a pleasure focus versus a goal focus. So those are a couple of examples of that.
Approve of the soft cock, basically.
Approve of the soft cock. With premature ejaculation, Alicia mentioned it earlier, for women, it's the same for guys. Go way slower. Relax. Literally move hands slower. If it's intercourse, literally move slower. Talk, take breaks. That will calm the nervous system. The sympathetic or adrenalized nervous system will calm down, and the parasympathetic or relaxation nervous system will start to take over. The body chemistry will change. So that tends to work both for premature ejaculation and for guys whose cocks don't get hard. So that's the first part. And then the other part is to acknowledge that the feminine, sometimes the guy ejaculates because the woman's really done with him, and not done with him forever, but just kind of wants that to happen. Or a guy's cock doesn't get hard because the woman doesn't want his cock hard in that moment. Now, we have to talk with people and see what's actually going on there. It's complex, so I'm just kind of giving you an overview, but really acknowledging that the feminine has a lot to say, or a lot of impact in the male arousal level or not arousal level, or ejaculation or not ejaculation. And these two sort of categories of issues are not mutually exclusive. They're often kind of interplaying, and sometimes in a vicious circle. Sometimes it's more of one, sometimes it's more of another. So we really have to, meet the person and actually decipher what's going on. But that's the kind of the range, sort of the spectrum of what we see.
Right. And then I imagine, on both sides, there's self-blame of, and all this pressure that people put on themselves, performance anxiety. And, so I just think that must be such a core part of your work, is teaching people how to work with those internal pressures.
The first day of the pleasure course, half of it is about getting your inner critic or your superego off your back.
Uh-huh.
That psychological structure is really dedicated to maintaining the status quo. Even if the status quo is dysfunctional, it's dedicated to maintaining that. And there really is no growth and development when we're kind of hammering ourselves or judging ourselves or beating ourselves up. And then we translate that to our partners, and it just doesn't work. So, if I could give everybody sort of a starting tip is, you're awesome, you're beautiful, you're amazing, your body, you're being yourself, no matter what, really. No matter what, even if somebody's in prison listening to this podcast, you're just as beautiful as everybody and everything. And, that starts to open things up. And that kind of love and tenderness is really necessary if we're going to take it all the way down to the sex center and orgasm.
Well, I appreciate you naming that. And I do think it's so insidious. And I also think that truly getting the inner critic off the back and is a deep journey. So if ever your people need help with that and additional resources, refer them to season 1 of the Healing Feeling Shit Show, because I think that's what's so fun, is how do we actually liberate ourselves and heal those voices and find freedom. I want to shift gears before we wrap up, and you guys have things to do, and so we can't talk forever, although it would really be fun, extended pleasure interview. But the other main thing that I see that you guys are really skillful with is, helping people once they've gotten into a rut, and how do they maintain this over time, and, resurrecting chemistry, if you will. And wondering if we could spend a little time with that. Just how do you help couples either maintain or find again lost chemistry?
Yes, I love that question. I mean, this is the main reason that couples come to work with us. They've got these beautiful relationships. Often they're married and they have kids, or they're more in the early stages, but they're together and they love each other, and they find themselves like not as turned on as they once were. And where's the chemistry? Where's the passion? And they really want to get that back, because there's a lot of things that people do with that reality of experiencing lack of chemistry, that aren't so great for themselves in the relationship. So it's really great when couples come to see us, because the chemistry is there. It's there. It's just not being acknowledged or blocked, or the couple's not spending enough time or having enough space. And what we do with couples that have the desire to have more chemistry is we give them touching exercises. We have a range of about 12 different touching exercises, from emotional kind of not therapeutic, but like nurturing touch, all the way to the other end of the spectrum of the clitoral stroking practice, extended orgasm. So we train them in that. So it's not just wishing they could have more chemistry and wondering when it's going to come back, but actual practices that will reignite that chemistry.
For example, every day, every morning, Alicia sits up by my side. She puts one hand on my heart, one hand on my abdomen. And we put on some new age music and some incense. And it just gets me, it like heals my childhood, it's amazing. And then about 10 minutes later, I sit up and she lays down and I stroke her clitoris, and, the day is off and running.
Oh my God. Who's coming to their house tomorrow?
Maybe you.
Coffee. I think it might be me. So beautiful. So one question. So you're tending each other's needs and wounds, and I like how it's specified that you might need, and I'm sure, you probably do various things with each other, but I like that what you're doing for each other is different and seems really nuanced to what you each need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there, I've heard of, and I'm curious, I'm sure some of our listeners are going to associate what you're talking about with oming. And I know I don't know that we should waste any of our time, like looking at the difference, but there's so much more talk about clitoral stroking than, the male equivalent. Do you teach the male equivalent?
We do teach the male equivalent. We don't teach it in the exact same way. So we don't do demonstrations of male orgasm in front of groups of 60 people or even 5 people. We don't do the physical in person, but I train women how to stroke cock and suck cock. And I do that verbally, and then they can go and practice it in the privacy of their own home. But we certainly tend to it because males are totally capable of having orgasm and extended orgasm in their bodies.
Awesome. You know, one thing that I think is also interesting about what you just shared about your morning routine is that I know one of my energy teachers has talked about how, you know, the women's feminine center is in the pelvis, and the men's feminine center is in the heart. And so, and learning how to be skillful with that as a woman, how to not feel like I'm entitled to enter a man's heart any more than I would want a man to feel entitled to enter my pelvis. And so it's interesting that your example about your mornings are you're both tending each other's, you know, I don't know if you see it that way as far as the man's feminine center being the heart, but you're tending the feminine, you're tending the vulnerable, receptive part of each of you.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's really where it's at, Rachel, is being inclusive, you know, being awake. You know, really what I learned in the Zen monastery was to include it all and be bold and intense, and Zen, you could say, but about being tender and about the unenlightened parts of ourselves, or the wounds, or the issues. So it's really much more about inclusion and acceptance and being free to be present with all of it, than it's about, you know, that we have some kind of ideal psychology or ideal relationship or ideal sex life or anything like that. The inclusion is what actually makes it extraordinary, what makes the extended orgasm possible, what makes the love possible, what makes the increasing intimacy and attraction to each other after almost 2 decades possible.
So beautiful. I couldn't agree more, especially when it comes to healing. It's, you know, including all the parts. So one question just before, I mean, actually I have one specific question about the couples over time. It sounds like you're giving a lot of skill for the people who want to resurrect or maintain chemistry to how to come together. I'm wondering if you ever see that sometimes chemistry is lost by people being so either enmeshed or codependent, or not actually creating space where there can be polarity or attraction.
Well, that definitely happens. And part of our work with couples, it certainly includes all of the practical exercises we just spoke of, but we work deeply psychologically with couples to sort out whatever relationship dynamics are killing the chemistry, you know, because there's got to be a good masculine feminine dynamic going on between the two people, and whatever challenges there are need to be illuminated.
Cool. So one question I have for you guys in this changing world, and you know, at this current time where, you know, so much dating is happening on the internet and people are under the specific speeds and pressures they're under, how do you see these challenges that people have with their sexual aliveness and being able to allow pleasure? How do you see it shifting, or what do you think is unique to today?
Well, today's a very extreme time. Things are changing dramatically and quickly. So right now, I think that you know, like when you roll the dice, there's the moment you pick the dice up, there's rolling the dice, there's the dice tinkling around on the floor or whatever, and then there's where the dice lands and what numbers are on the face of the die when it lands. I think right now the dice are kind of tinkling around. We don't really know. There's a lot of openness happening. There's a lot of open-mindedness. There's also a big shutdown in sexuality. People are actually having less sex. You know, in Japan, it's not uncommon to be 35 years old and a virgin. It's the country with the most developed pornography industry. Their population numbers are declining because people are not having babies and not getting into relationships. They're right about, I just saw this on YouTube yesterday, they're right about to start selling more adult diapers than child diapers. Just stick with the shit show.
I thank you so much. You're just so on brand. I love it.
So things are now happening in extreme ways, and where it's all going to land, I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah. Alicia, do you want to pipe in anything?
That covers it. Very well said.
It does provide an opportunity for folks who do want to learn and develop.
Right. Yeah. There's like less stigma and shame. There's more information than ever, but we're also just so virtually channeled that, so much of these great experiences are all just through embodiment and sensation and real life. And so there's so much focus. Even this podcast will be, through people's little handheld computers, our second brain. So, how to stay awake. Well, I think for anyone listening and enjoying these fine folks, I feel inspired. I'm definitely going to their house in the morning. But anyone else who wants to learn from the Davon method and study, especially if you're in the Bay Area, but it sounds like you can join in maybe, in other places as well. Why don't you tell people how to find you and what the best way to plug into what you're doing is?
I'll leave that to Alicia. I'll just say one thing, which is, the ground game is very important, and that's one of the reasons we throw a lot of parties and, we kind of have a sort of people interacting kind of thing. But nowadays, we've really included the whole virtual world just to really give access to this.
Awesome.
Yeah. So in that vein, we are accessible in person and virtually. So we're based in San Francisco, and I'll give our website in a minute and how you can get in touch with us. But we've got all kinds of ways for people to engage in our school. You can take the pleasure course, which we've been talking about. It's a weekend seminar, and we have a weekly group coaching program, and we have private coaching and extended orgasm training, where you can hands-on with the partner, learn that. And we have parties and social events, and we have a really fun apprenticeship and affiliate program. And all of our programs are for both singles and couples. I want to mention that. Sometimes people think, oh, you have to have a partner. You don't. It's usually 50% singles, 50% couples. Sometimes people come like they're in a relationship, but they're here without their partner, So it's really for everybody. And for anybody listening to this, we are offering a gifted coaching session. You can choose to have it with Erwan or have it with me. The session can be on Zoom. It can be in person. It'll be about 45 minutes long, and the purpose of it will be to dive deeply into some particular issue or goal or desire that you have in your romantic life, in your love life. And as you can see from this podcast, nothing is off limits. We really love supporting people, and we can also lay out the different offerings we have in detail and make a recommendation at the end of the coaching session of what might be best. And if there's something that you're needing that we don't offer, we'll make a recommendation for that.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad you did that. I had no idea. So how do people claim their gift?
Yes. So the best way to claim your gift would be to text this phone number, which is 415-308-9580. So I'll say it again. It's 415-308-9580. So that's the best and quickest way. I'm also going to give you our website now. So the website is pleasurecourse.com. So it's just how it sounds, pleasurecourse.com.
Well, that's awesome. I definitely wrote the number down. I'm going to hit you guys up, and I hope everyone else does also, because we could all use some help, right?
Everybody, support makes all the difference. Alicia and I have a ton of support, and we feel grateful and blessed for it.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm really glad to introduce you to the folks on the Shit Show Journey, the feelings movement, I call it. And I would love to stay connected to you guys, and maybe we should do a, fucking dating. I'm having that kind of week with it, but fucking dating episode. But lovely to have you on, and I'm so glad you're doing the work you're doing.
You were awesome,
Thank
Rachel.
you. We had a
Yeah.
great time. Thanks for having us.
It was fun. Okay, everyone, we'll see you next week. And check out, go get 415-308-9580. Get your gift. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks always to Scott Ferreter of the Feelings Parade for the epic tunes and edits. And if you love what we're up to here, please share with your friends, rate and review on iTunes so other folks can get potty trained too. And we'll see you next time.